Hello, everyone. Thank you to Professors Kate Banansinga and Maria Sita Reeder, and also the University of Cincinnati School of Art for inviting me to speak to all of you. I'm thrilled to be sharing my work with you, and I really appreciate your insightful questions. I thought about them for quite some time and also kind of weave them into the talk. And also, I really appreciate that you're taking the time and making the time um, during this wild pandemic, end of semester whirlwind, um, to listen to me speak about my work. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen here. And I will be reading from notes. So I'll be looking down a lot, but we'll try to look at the camera as much as possible. I always love talking to students, so this virtual format is still very unique to me. Okay. In response to your questions, I put this talk together as a collage, mapping out a journey for you where I collected pieces from different times in my life, weaved with mixed mediums, multidisciplinary. I titled this talk Collage as Resistance, Reappropriation, and Survival because it is the way I live my life and practice. I meld a sentence in a book with a family object, with a viral photograph. It is a mishmash of ideas and visuals where I find the richest connections and conversations. As an undergraduate, I majored in art history and studio art. I wanted to be a curator. While I was in school, there was still a gaping hole in the art world for people of color and LGBTQ artists. My goal as a curator was to create spaces for artists that look like me, who were passionate about questioning boundaries and social inequities. However, there were many obstacles. Many times, art spaces are exclusive and unwelcoming, but spaces that center your thoughts and ways of being do exist. You need to look for them, or you need to build them yourselves, or with a collective. And there are spaces everywhere resting on stolen land, supported by money obtained at the cost of POC, Black, poor, Indigenous, LGBTQ lives. You and I are most likely standing and exhibiting our work in them right now. I am recording from the original homelands of the earthwork builders, as well as other tribal nations of the region, such as Shawnee, Miami, Wyandotte, Delaware, the people of the Fort Ancient, Hopewell, and Adena cultures. I think you have to make your work, show your work, and build your community, and then help others navigate their own pathways out or in. In 2004, I was invited by the Queen's Museum to create an installation for a show titled Fatal Love, the first US museum exhibition of artists of the South Asian diaspora. I immediately gravitated towards the bathrooms because it was and still is such a charged room in one's home and in the public. In a public institution such as the Queen's Museum, it sits on the periphery of the main galleries. My work often does this. It brings things from the periphery into the center. Lotas are water vessels used to clean oneself after using the toilet. They have been used for centuries across Asia and Africa. They are common in Muslim diasporas. For Lota stories, I first recorded my own story of hiding this tool, the Lota, and act of cleaning oneself. When I talked to several Muslim and South Asian friends about the installation, they also had stories of the preservation of self in a hostile environment. Some were funny and some were sad. I began recording them, and then they recommended others who had stories. Soon I had a looped audio of stories, and I'm going to play you one of those audio clips that were looped in the bathrooms of the Queen's Museum. So let's see.
I grew up in a Muslim household and I used the lota all my life. And when I went away to college, it was the first time I realized how much I had gotten used to using a lota. And living with roommates who didn't use a lota, I felt very ashamed that I did use a lota. But of course, wanting to be as Americanized as I could possibly be, I didn't use it for a while, but I began to really miss feeling that clean. So there were times when I would take an old McDonald's cup into the bathroom, or I'd pretend like I was still drinking water from my own cup, and I just happened to walk into the bathroom with it. There were even times when I used cups that my roommates had in the bathroom where they would keep their toothbrushes in and toothpaste, and I always hoped that nobody would find out, especially because the insides of their cups would be so dirty, and then after I used it they'd be so clean, and I always thought I'd be caught, but I never was found out. And even to this day, I've been out of college for a little over 10 years now. You know, I had a plant watering can in the bathroom, and I only recently revealed to my boyfriend, who didn't grow up using a lota, what it was for. And it's all out and exposed now, and it feels good.
I was actually very thirsty, so this could be used as a lota, but it's not. Um, so, yeah, actually, this person told her boyfriend that she used a lota after she had recorded this, so I thought that was um, very funny. Okay, so continuing on. At the same time, I decided there should be a visual component, which is the suspended lotas that you see here in the documentation photos. I purchased and I purchased several lotas and had a collage night at my apartment, inviting more friends and participants to collage the lotas with plastic water or juice bottle labels. Lota Stories is a significant work to me. It was the first time I had collaborated with my community to realize a work. The installation was also important to me because it was my first museum show in my birthplace of Queens. There was also a nice New York Times piece written about the work. The story of the Lota has reemerged during the height of the pandemic when people were hoarding toilet paper. And here are some other artists' works from the Lota or about the Lota, and some memes that emerged, between 2019 and now. Um, I think I learned how special it is to seek and build community from my family. I come from a big family. I have 6 siblings. My parents moved from Pakistan to Philadelphia to Brooklyn to then Queens in the 1970s. When they lived in apartments, they when they lived in apartments, they would find ways to bring their friends into the building. While in undergrad, I believed it was essential for me to interact with a community of artists to continue to grow as a visual artist. And my older sister, who is a writer, found that in a group of South Asian women called the South Asian Women's Creative Collective, or SAUCY. Founded in 1997 by artist Jayashriya Bichandani and a collective of artists including Chitra Ganesh, DJ Rekha, Swati Khurana, Prerna Reddy, Sarita Karana, among others. It started off as a community of radical artists tired of the lack of inclusion lack of inclusion in galleries and larger struggles with racism, misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia in the art world. We started gathering and having critiques in a basement on St. Mark's Place in New York City, hosting multidisciplinary exhibitions and festivals, supporting our communities through protests. It was an exciting time and a big part of my growth as a visual artist. I also found several jobs through this community. While in school, I worked at the art office at City College, CUNY. I was an office manager to DJ Rekha. I was an artist assistant to Chitra Ganesh. I was an intern at the Brooklyn Museum and worked with Tumelo Musaka and Charlotta Kotek on the museum's first exhibition on focusing on local Brooklyn artists titled Open House. And this led me to work at one of the first commercial contemporary South Asian art galleries in New York City called Bose Pacia. I started off as an archivist assistant, then registrar, then director. Afterwards, I was the director of a nonprofit called Plus 91 Foundation, which focused on supporting South Asian art and artists through its pop up exhibition programs, artist residency, and archive. Much like collage, I was piecing together my role as an artist in the world. In my practice and jobs, I continue to address narratives which have been traditionally excluded from the Eurocentric art historical canon, and it is hard. After working in the commercial and nonprofit sector for 10 years, I applied to fully funded grad schools to get my MFA. I didn't want to take out any student loans, and I applied to schools outside of New York City. I really wanted to leave this comfortable yet difficult and exhausting bubble. I wanted to concentrate on making and also be an uncomfortable in sorry, be in an uncomfortable environment, away from home, away from family, away from a community I was a part of for 20 years. Moving to Ohio was the first time where I was the only POC at academic events and art openings. It was mind boggling to me. It was very difficult, but I was lucky that I could make trips back to New York City or have FaceTime studio visits with friends and colleagues. However, with time, I got to know POC and Black organizers in Columbus. But that uncomfortable moment helped me grow as an artist and helped me build a language for the themes in my practice. By deeply engaging with my process in grad school for 3 years, I learned that I often take things apart, inspect the pieces, and put them together. I mark them and I rearrange them as a way to see the possibilities and limits of the pieces. In 2015, my mother gave me this broken object, a 12 by 12 by 12-inch Taj Mahal replica made of compressed marble that functioned as a lamp. She said to me, "You're an artist. Can you fix this?" I thought she was making an extraordinary connection, an artist as fixer, and specifically of objects. This kind of object is typical in Muslim and South Asian immigrant homes, where it creates visual traces of memory, migration, and meaning. And of course, you can see here it can be purchased online for $200. The Taj Mahal is a monument and a symbol of love, a mausoleum built by the 16th century Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan for his wife Mumtaz. The most well known part of the Taj Mahal is Mumtaz's tomb. It is this tomb that is replicated in many forms as souvenirs. My work, building the Taj Mahal for my mother, is an unfolding of an object and a relationship. At first, I decided to see if I could simply fix the lamp. Some parts fit into each other, but fissures remained. I found myself examining each broken piece and its edges as I laid them out on a table in my studio. I started to trace these broken pieces and then made drawings of them. The work is a growing collection of drawings, text messages, magazine cutouts, stencils, photographs, and other ephemera about and of this lamp and the actual Taj Mahal. These records became a document of destruction. These records became a meditation of something that would never be whole. The process had made the possibility of rebuilding the lamp quite distant. I started to think of the wall as an art support. This was this work was a first attempt to work directly on the wall. I extracted text from three earlier works composed of English and Urdu. The letters are magnified, broken, and abstracted. The abstracted forms overlap, swarm, float, and wrap around two L shaped movable walls. These walls were installed in a broken cube formation. To view the work in its entirety, one must walk around the broken cube. This, I realized, mimicked the movement I participated in and witnessed of Muslims circling the Kaaba, the most holy structure in Islam. The architecture becomes a sacred object because of this movement. This work inspired my monochromatic aesthetic. The black text against a white background evokes a newspaper, a page in the Quran, a phrase in a poem. Not only was I looking at the Arabic and Urdu texts on the page and in mosques, I was also studying the art of Glenn Ligon, who copies and repeats literary text from comments on the black male body. I was also remembering the layers of spray paint and text that I had encountered in New York City, but also the stenciled images and text peeling and crackling on a wall in Cholula, Mexico, where I was an artist in residence for 2 months at Risquache Residency in San Francisco, Cuapa, which also reminded me of the public walls in my parents' hometowns in Pakistan. I implemented some of these aesthetic techniques of layering and erasure to my own art practice. I began looking at my own archive of collected media images, the sacred, mundane, and profane. I have been collecting images from newspapers and magazines for 19 years. I decided to put some of them up in two cubicles I had built in my studio. These images were tacked on chaotically and systemically, which is representative of my fascination with print images and how they are shared, consumed, and experienced. I wrote about the imagery I was seeing on these walls, how and why how and why images were connecting and disconnecting. I asked myself questions such as how do we see and how are we seen individually and collectively? At the same time, I was making smaller collages with family photographs and media images. This process then informed my wall drawings. I collapsed and expanded my practice of collecting, collaging, stenciling, and drawing. I drew on my studio wall. I used charcoal because of its intensity of color, how it reacted with stencils, and how it erased and left a mark. I was thinking about the work of Shazia Sikandar, who blends traditional Mughal miniature technique with the language of graphic novels, history with pop culture, and the politics of the time. I was also looking at the work of Kara Walker, who draws attention to how forms of representation of slavery are linked to wider social assumptions. At the same time, I was recalling the images of Muslim countries, cities, villages, people, and families being bombed, looping in the media. The most significant were the images of the Gulf War in 1991 and this 2014 New York Times image of Gaza. I am always looking, collecting, capturing images in my mind, in my sketchbook, on my phone, in video, and piecing together the many contradictions of stories these images reveal and veil. I started drawing on my collected archive, especially newspapers. On this October 28th, 2012 New York Times page, there is an article about migratory birds getting killed by flying into Toronto's glass buildings. The images show illustrated dead birds with their wings bound to their bodies and their legs limp on the page. The article below is about a rape victim in Haryana, in a state in northern India. The image shows both mother and daughter sitting close, covered by their shawls. The act of bounding, silencing, of covering or covering were emphasized by my addition of the charcoal and pen. I use formal techniques such as masking the text with charcoal and scribbling the images with pen to erase the text identifying specific people, places, and stories. The violence illustrated in the newspaper article itself and images is reiterated in the treatment of the text, images, and pages as an artwork. The newsprint was a critical site for me. It is the first type of drawing paper used in a drawing class. It's thin and not archival and also evokes the printed newspaper. In Family 2017, I combined my interest in the cutout or stencil and newsprint. I cut into the newsprint to show the underlying stories behind the lines. I saw them as inverting the relationship between positive and negative space, scrambling what it means to be absent and present. This was my first large stencil work. The outer edges of the lines are dark and ruptured with use. The family floats with no placement or stable ground. I'm really excited that this work is currently being shown for the first time at the National Museum of Women in the Arts in DC in an exhibition titled Paper Roots, an exhibition showcasing 22 artists who respond to the many uses and cultural associations of paper. I then took this stencil and used it to create a wall drawing. Here is the positive of the stencil shown previously. I rubbed charcoal through the cutouts, erased the lines, redrew the lines, printed over the lines. This is my family was an expansive drawing that spread across two walls measuring 39 feet. The work featured three central vignettes, a silhouette of my family, three butchers pinning and slaughtering a goat, and three firefighters holding up a flag. The vignettes were made with large-scale hand-cut stencils. The vignettes were then layered and surrounded by charcoal-saturated rags, prayer rug fringe, and a ledge to catch erasure and charcoal remnants. It was fragile, messy, and big. Through the month-long exhibition, I visited the gallery almost every day, erasing and adding elements, and thereby making different layers visible and invisible. This physicality and labor of making and breaking and fixing usually was reserved for my private studio time. But in this installation, it is now visible in the public space or gallery. While installing this piece, Donald Trump announced the Muslim ban. And so all that anger and feeling of isolation and fear was put into the work through its content and process. There was a switch in the way I worked. I started to work with cutouts more, with black and white materials such as graphite, ink, and charcoal. I was not thinking about and speaking to, I was, sorry, I was now thinking about and speaking to bigger issues than the self. This was the moment I realized the impact art could have in gallery spaces, in public spaces. I showed this work to my young nieces and nephews, and that's when I knew that my work was inspiring and made an impact. They were asking questions. They were paying closer attention to the news around them and conversations happening within my family, among friends, in their schools. I started to use stencils and cutouts as a tool to work through my questions about the structures we inherit. I continue to work on the wall and still prefer this temporary and intuitive way of working. I use my studio time to experiment with material and mark making methods. I cut out many stencils from paper that I keep and use until completely ruptured. I don't throw anything away. Many times I plan out the wall drawing on paper, but I am sight reactive when in front of the wall. This is a work I had made on the walls of my studio at Vermont Studio Center, where I did not plan the wall drawing on paper. The work was inspired by the TSA inspection notice left in my luggage, as this was often the case when I travel. I took this note and expanded the text, made several stencils of the sentences. The center of the drawing includes a surveillance post with no cameras and a cacophony of images of Muslim men from my family. Let's go back to that image. So the border here is made up of the text from that TSA note, and then you see the empty surveillance post, and you kind of see the images of male family members here that are kind of, visible and also crossed out and erased. I became fascinated by the visuals that made up the border in paintings, in carpets, in architecture, in life. I started to delve deeper into questions of barriers, walls, and borders. The border is a geographical boundary that is imaginary, marginal, and contingent, and yet physical, tangible, and with real power. I started to think about ways that the body move through and are blocked and misdirected by borders, structures, instruction. I experimented with compositions of the border in wall drawing, works on paper, video, and performance. For this work, I collected and traced images from media images of families being torn apart by the Muslim and immigration bans. I drew incomplete drawings of these figures from media images overlapping, covering, holding the lines. As I planned my wall drawings on paper, I found myself thinking about the relationships between borders and belonging: physical, material, intellectual, emotional, ephemeral, mental belonging. These intricate and detailed drawings are culled from my subconscious, showing objects of belonging combined with Islamic patterns, borders, redaction, and surveillance utilities. I use the construct of the Afghani and Persian carpet, its borders and center, to create diaristic works, This drawing is inspired by a 17th century drawing of an Iranian carpet that showed all the belongings of a Sufi, a mystic. This one shows a celestial universe with moons, spikes, and the imaginary imagery of redaction. The borders in these drawings are as important as the center. Here I surrounded this universe with a drawing of barbed wire. So that's what you see in the border there. My work shifts in scale, as you can notice. A good example of this can be seen with a project I did at a residency in Barcelona. Holy Grace Hotel in Barcelona had invited me to create a wall drawing, but I also made one drawing a day on 8.5 by 11-inch sheets of paper during my 12-day stay. The following drawings were diaristic, document-size works tracing my steps through the city. Using the mihrab as a motif, a guideline. A mihrab, often found in mosques, is a niche or area that instructs Muslims towards the direction of prayer. Architectural formations like this that direct bodies is a visual I am fascinated with. These could be crosswalks, fences, doorways, but in this series of 12 drawings, I was just focusing on the mihrab, which is this shape that you kind of see in each of them. So, yep. For the wall drawing, I was inspired by the patterns on the sidewalk, something that Barcelona is known for. These tiles were in upper class neighborhoods and continued through middle class neighborhoods and then again through working class neighborhoods. The buildings and storefronts and amount of restaurants and boutiques changed, but these tiles remained the same. The wall drawing is made up of individual tiles drawn directly on the wall using ink, which form a grid. The paint strictly stops at, or the ink strictly stops at some borders but spills into others, merging to make another drawing of the plants I saw on my daily walks. Agave, palm trees, oleanders, the Mediterranean dwarf, yucca, and many more that have a distinct migratory path and use within a garden, the outdoors. Along with image making through stencils and drawing, I started to use the projector to magnify my drawings to trace on the wall. Noticing this process opened a new way of working with collage and drawing and projection. This is a performance started in 2018, combining audience participation, body movement, drawing, and projection. This documentation I'm about to show you is the third iteration of the performance done at Control Shift in Oakland, California. So I'm going to play a little bit of it for you. Let's find a good spot here. So as I'm projecting drawing the projected image, I'm also kind of drawing my shadow as well, so it becomes part of the wall drawing. So I just shouted the number 1. Um, Let me just continue while this is playing. I'll explain some more. So the person to my left is tracing the image, and I'm trying to trace the image, but also getting stuck at my shadow. And there's a table of materials, black and white materials. So charcoal, graphite, ink, white paint, pencil. And that's where I kind of go to get my materials. So I'm just going to continue reading as this plays, and hopefully it won't freeze while I'm reading. Each viewer receives a passport as soon as they enter the space. This passport instructs them to come up to the wall and trace the image with me with a specific material. And each passport, some passports have numbers and some don't. So this person obviously had the number 1. After an hour, there is a residue of all our tracings on the wall of multiple images projected. The overarching theme of the performance is violence, and that can be seen in multiple ways. So, for the documentation you are looking at now, I focused on the word running, and that means running away from or towards being chased. The images selected were from art historical reproductions, from mass media images, as well as text from articles regarding running in terms of migration, refugees, war, terrorism, and police brutality in the US. And I'm just going to forward this a bit so that you can just see a couple of other switches that happen or images that are projected. And each time I do this performance, I curate the imagery so that it's under the umbrella term of violence. Okay, so let's just stop that. And then I've done this performance, I think 4 or 5 times. So these are just some of the drawings that ended up on the wall after the performance. So this was a 20-minute performance. This was a 30-minute performance at Corrugate Gallery in Columbus. This was the one that you just saw the documentation to at Control Shift in Oakland, California. And this was an hour performance. And then this was the most recent performance I did in February at the Kentler International Drawing Space in Red Hook, Brooklyn. And this was an hour. So in February of 2020, the performance was part of my solo exhibition, The Cost of Entry at the Kentler International Drawing Space in Brooklyn. Excuse me. The So for the performance, the projection, so you can see the drawing here. Um, for the performance, the projections were curated to show surveillance throughout history. 1960s police informants, post 9/11, and current day police informants of mosques, specifically a mosque in Queens that my father had founded, IDs of Japanese Americans in internment camps in Utah, California, Arizona, Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, and Arkansas, facial recognition technology, TSA, airport x ray scans, video surveillance notices on public and private buildings, and the list goes on. So, the entire list I was projecting in our performance. For the exhibition, I looked at my family through the lens of surveillance and government issued IDs, such as passports, driver's licenses, green cards, visas. The Muslim ban and immigration detention have focused public attention on the violence of the border, but documentation such as passports has been central to control Black and Brown people since the dawn of colonialism and enslavement. And here are some images from the work in the show. The exhibition also included cutouts on newsprint and vellum, smudged with charcoal and used. None of the portraits have faces, but hold a multitude of meanings. As guest writer and curator Jasmine Wahi stated, the anonymity could be read as protection, privacy, and self preservation, and signify an erasure within a country. The show also included 2 by 2 inch drawings evoking the size of passport photos, but emphasizing the erasure and redaction of the individual body. So these are the 2 by 2 inch passport photo drawings, and there were about 36 of these. And during the pandemic, I've continued to make these smaller drawings. Currently up at the Columbus Museum of Art is the wall drawing titled The Land of Promise. It will be up until next summer, so hopefully you will be able to check it out. But there will be a virtual component that will be available after February of next year, 2021. The installation is also surrounded by curated works from the permanent collection in the exhibition titled Justice in America, a Visual Inquiry. Here, a dialectical question is posed. Under the banner of justice, the artworks focus on modes of violence and punishment. I approached this long-term installation by looking at it in two parts. The first part, installed in August, I focused on the wall drawing along the perimeter of the 4 doorways created with stencils and hand drawing. Through research into CMA's permanent collection and my own archives, I created the stencils and the drawings. At the same time, we were in month 6 of the pandemic, and protests against police brutality were happening on the streets at a global level. I brought all this into the installation. Not only was I drawing upon a collection of images, I was looking at the static museum and participating in protests happening outside of its walls. In the wall drawing, I engaged the gallery's architecture and combined motifs from a range of sources. Real life, decorative patterns typical of art of the Islamic world, interweaved with images of migration, of labor, incarceration, and protest. I designated each of the four doorways in the gallery space with specific themes, and I'm just going to quickly show you those doorways. So the designated themes of each of the four doorways was land, um, horizon, future, and afterlife. So this is the land wall drawing, and on the right, you can see details from the drawing. And so I was thinking about what the land kind of gives us and means, and growth and death and rebirth, and how it's used. This is the doorway across from land, which is horizon, and you have a detail on the right. And I was thinking about the sky, so thinking about looking up and also looking down. And so that led me to thinking about surveillance. And so you see imagery of cameras, and then checkpoints and helicopters, but also see plants kind of growing up, or butterflies flying, fireworks exploding. This wall drawing is the future. So you see the detail on the right, and then also some imagery from all of the other three um, doorways, and they're broken up. And I see this as a burning. So um, the future means burning everything down, and a rebirth, a recharging of everything for the future to happen. And then this doorway is right across from future, and its theme is the afterlife. And you see a detail here. So you see windows of the 8-star um, Islamic motif, 8-pointed star Islamic motif. And so you're kind of looking into this gateway and also looking out. So you see like fingers climbing out here. This is blank, a blank hole. These are empty. This is broken apart and kind of flying off of the border. The second phase of installation will include drawings from community members engaged by a vision board workshop led by me, that speaks to the four themes of the doorways. So land, horizon, future, afterlife. Members are contributing to the drawing and will be acknowledged as collaborators of the wall drawing. I am currently finishing up these workshops, and in February 2021, the wall drawing will continue along this area, the foot or the subterranean of the gallery space, connecting all four doorways. And here are some installation shots that you can see both my wall drawing amongst the permanent collection, and curated by Danny Marcus. And so we have Cameron Rowland, the artist Cameron Rowland, Luis Jimenez and Masumi Hayashi, Sue Ko, Marion Pelfy, Danny Lyon, Mary Jo Bowl, among others. And I think that's it. Yes. So thank you so much. This was very thought provoking for me as well. Doing this kind of piecing together of my practice and also getting your questions and responding to them. And I hope I responded to some of them in the artist talk, but I wanted to take this final moment and kind of address about three specific questions. One was, what is one piece of advice you have for a POC artist who is also trying to portray and further explore their culture and the complexities of their identity through their art? This is an excellent question. I don't have all the answers, but um, as I was kind of thinking about this question, which I often struggle with, um, still struggle with, was thinking, I think the best piece of advice that I can give is to make a lot of work. And I know that is hard to do during this time of the pandemic um, and other realities that we are in. But I would say just make a lot of it, make a lot of work, and show it to people who can talk about the themes that you are kind of questioning and critiquing. Um, and also, don't show everything to people. You don't have to. And I know that there will be a lot of obstacles in making the work, and that can be within you, but also um, with others. And I think, yeah, just keep making the work and also building your community. I think that's um, how I would answer that question, or how I would advise you. Um, The two other questions were, you have a lot of pieces about social justice. What do you believe is the artist's role in this movement? And in your artist statement on your website, you mentioned that your process of assembling images, texts, and materials enacts the labor of undoing this world and building another. In the world that you are building for people to see, what would be the role of art, and how would historic and contemporary art contribute to make that world a better place than the one we live in now? Um, Again, two very excellent questions, and also very difficult questions. And I think so. In my work, I think I address issues that um, I'm thinking about, that catch my intellect, that I have, that I want to learn about further, and um, and I think the role of the artist is to ask questions and to critique the environment that we're in um, openly. And so a lot of times I hear my students, you know, ask, or they kind of like fight this a lot. Why can't I just make pretty things? And I mean, I don't judge them at all. I think I make pretty things often. Um, but I think, like, pretty things meaning like, why can't I just make a landscape or a still life or a flower? But I think all of that is still political. And so, like, for example, the landscape is a place, it has a history, it is a record of life and death. And then that still life, it contains objects that kind of speak to class and time. And then also, if, drawing a flower, that kind of speaks to rebirth and growth and climate. But I guess it depends on who is looking at the work, and there's a thin line between intention and the audience eye, and that I think you will have to figure out yourself. um, how either wide or thin that line is. Um, and that's it. I think I hope I have answered your questions. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and letting me talk for, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour about my work. Um, and I hope we all can come out of this safe and healthy. And yeah, and that's it. Thank you so much.